Mhm.
and we can go ahead and jump in for this week. Yay. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to slightly enlarge my screen. You see, it already started. You see how it's doing?
Yes.
It's so distracting. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stop video just so it's not so distracting. But you should be able to still hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. We're going to get started looking at, we're going to continue talking about text complexity today. And that's actually how we're going to kind of start it. So last module, we began looking at text complexity and text diversity. So we were actually using that, it's called a reading diversity tool. And essentially, it's a way that we are just measuring, we're trying to measure and evaluate and analyze the appropriateness of our lesson plans and the texts that we're using in our class for our students. So we're trying to see, is it challenging enough? Are they at the right level? And are they representative of our students' cultures, backgrounds, learning styles in some cases? And that's kind of what we're going to move forward with today. So our objectives for today is to analyze a multidimensional model for measuring text complexity. So we're continuing to look at that concept of text complexity, and we're going to analyze the role that morphemic awareness and fluency play in reading comprehension and consider implications for our content areas. So we're actually going to take a look at what morphemic awareness is and what fluency is when we're talking about text. We're going to examine methods to assess learner readiness for a literacy-based lesson. We're going to preview some of the midterm expectations because remember, beginning with Module 2, we're starting to build our practices and our skills because we're going to use them in a portfolio for our midterm. So we're just going to look a little bit closer about how that all comes into play. And then we're going to complete 2 hours of field work this week or whatever you need to complete based on your schedule. So here are our essential questions. How can we ensure that we are selecting the appropriate text for learner readiness and interests? And what instructional strategies can we implement to support student acquisition of complex text? So the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to watch this video. It's actually a screencast and it breaks down text complexity and how we can better understand what text complexity is. So that's the very first thing we're going to do. I'm going to take it off of this. I'm going to put it to where you'll be able to hear the video. And so this is our video, and I queued it to the exact part that we need to watch. And we may not watch all of it, but we're going to at least watch the first 5 minutes or so of it. If you have any issues hearing it or seeing it, please just go in the chat box and let me know because I can't see you while I'm sharing a video. So you could just let me know via the chat box. And I'm going to go ahead and start it.
Our objectives for this screencast are to understand what text complexity is and why it's important, and to become familiar with a process for determining text complexity. Our intended audience is any teacher or leader interested in learning more about text complexity, and the content in our screencast is most applicable to those who teach or support grades 2 through 8. Here is our agenda for this screencast. You can see that we'll work through the answers to several questions that you may have about text complexity. We'll begin by making a case for why text complexity is important. Next, we'll talk about what text complexity is and how to define a text complexity. And we'll close by naming next steps related to text complexity. Appendix A of the Common Core Standards tells us that demands on readers have increased over the last 50 years, while at the same time, K-12 reading texts have actually trended downward in difficulty. The authors of the Common Core recognized this problem and readjusted what students need to be reading in each grade level to be college and career ready. If you're interested in reading more on this topic, I recommend that you review Appendix A of the Common Core Standards. A pop-up to this resource is appearing on your screen now. We can see these new expectations for increasing text complexity reflected in the Common Core shifts and standards. On your screen, you're seeing the 3 big shifts in literacy in Common Core. Pause your screencast now to read each one. The third shift explicitly calls out complex text. And remember, these shifts derive right from the standards themselves. Here you're seeing the connection from this third shift to Anchor Standard 10, which tells us that students need to be reading complex texts independently and proficiently. Now let's take a look at Standard 10 more closely. On your screen, you can see an abridged vertical progression of Reading Standard 10 from grades 2 through 8. You may recall that Standard 10 ultimately has an impact on all other standards, because regardless of which additional standards that students are engaging with, they need to be doing so using appropriately complex texts. Pause your screencast now to read through this abridged vertical progression. As you can see, the Common Core standards are clear about what students need to do at each grade level by the end of the year. We'll talk more about what the text complexity bands are for each grade level as defined by Common Core later in this screencast. Now that we've spent some time talking about why text complexity is important, let's dig into what text complexity actually is and how to determine a text complexity. Text complexity is basically how easy or hard a text is to read. Appendix A of the Common Core Standards defines text complexity along 3 dimensions: quantitative, qualitative, and reader and task. The quantitative dimension is one that is difficult or impossible for a human to determine. It's typically measured by a computer and tells us about a text's word length and frequency, sentence length, and the text's readability. Lexile level is one form of quantitative measurement. The qualitative dimension is best measured or only measurable by an attentive human reader. It includes elements such as levels of meaning or purpose, structure, language conventionality and clarity, and knowledge demands. Reader and task refers to variables specific to particular readers, such as motivation, knowledge, and experiences, and to particular tasks, such as purpose and the complexity of the task assigned and the questions posed. This dimension of text complexity relies on teacher judgment and expertise. It's a combination of these 3 dimensions that now define how complex a text is or isn't. Now we're going to walk you through a do-it-yourself approach that you can use to determine a text's complexity. This approach can help you to become deeply familiar with a text, which is critical in planning for Common Core literacy instruction. Pause your screencast now to read through each of these steps, and we'll work through each of them with an example in a moment. Let's use The Grapes of Wrath for our example. Some of you may have read the book, but don't worry, it's not necessary to have read it to understand the model that I'll share with you now. The Grapes of Wrath is a novel about the Great Depression that chronicles the Dust Bowl migration of the 1930s. Let's walk through this text looking at the 3 dimensions of text complexity we just discussed to deepen our understanding of each. Let's start by considering the quantitative dimension. As we just discussed, Lexile level is one measure to determine a text's quantitative complexity. On your screen, you can see the Lexile ranges aligned to the Common Core standards for each grade band. The Grapes of Wrath's Lexile level is 680, which puts it within the 2nd to 3rd grade band. John Steinbeck, who wrote The Grapes of Wrath, is well known for his simple writing style. His writing has simple sentence structure and language, which accounts for this Lexile placement. But does this mean that we would want to teach this book in 2nd grade? No, and here's why. The topics and themes that Steinbeck captures in this book are far from simple, and that's why we have a multi-dimensional model for considering text complexity. So now let's move on to consider step 2, analyzing the qualitative elements of a text. As we mentioned, there are 4 qualitative elements that make a text more or less difficult for a student: purpose, structure, language, and knowledge demands. The qualitative measures of text complexity purposefully consider parts of the text that we may have overlooked in the past. Now let's think about where The Grapes of Wrath falls in terms of its qualitative complexity. Pause your screencast now to read through a description of each of these elements of qualitative complexity. This is a high-level analysis of the qualitative complexity of The Grapes of Wrath and can help us make decisions about whether it's at the right level of complexity for a particular grade level. If you're completing a qualitative analysis to inform your lesson level planning, you'd want to zoom into a smaller piece of the text and really dig into each dimension to give you a more robust picture of where students might struggle. While you don't need a rubric to determine a text's qualitative complexity, you may want one to reference to help you. If you wish, click on the pop-ups on your screen now to view the rubrics on the Student Achievement Partners website. One tip I'll offer if you choose to use a rubric is that it's less important to focus on exactly which complexity rating you'd assign to the text. Instead, focus in on which specific elements within the text would make it challenging for students. So now that we've considered the quantitative and qualitative elements of this text complexity, we can now tentatively suggest the grade band it would make sense to place it in. Though considered easy by many quantitative measures, The Grapes of Wrath has a sophistication of theme and content and lends itself to high-level literary and historical analysis. Our qualitative analysis therefore indicates that this book is not appropriate for 2nd or 3rd grade classrooms and would be best suited to high schoolers. Let's move on to looking at the last dimension, reader and task. When we evaluate texts along this dimension, we should consider the students and tasks we're going to ask. Considering where the text has landed using the qualitative and quantitative measures, you'd want to design tasks that mirror this grade band. When you think about the reader, you should consider their motivation, knowledge, and experience. We recommend that you use your expertise to design scaffolded and increasingly rigorous grade-level tasks. On your screen, you see 3 sample tasks that you could ask students about The Grapes of Wrath. Pause your screencast now to read each and consider which one might be best suited for students in grades 9 and 10. The high rigor task might be more appropriate for 12th grade or college level students, while the low rigor task likely wouldn't push students to fully engage with all this text has to offer. So we'd likely want to provide students with a task like the one in the middle. So now that we've considered each dimension of this text complexity, we can finally fully recommend placement in the appropriate text complexity band. Earlier, we tentatively recommended that we place this text in the high school grade band. I think that recommendation still makes sense. And in this case, we can confirm our thinking via Common Core Appendix B, which places The Grapes of Wrath in the grades 9 to 10 band. If you're interested in reading more about the text that Common Core has selected as exemplars for appropriate complexity in each grade level, click on the pop-up on your screen now. This will take you directly to Appendix B. Now we'd like to suggest 2 next steps for you to take after this screencast. The first next step we recommend is to use the 4-step process.
Okay, so that gives us a better understanding of text complexity, which is really what we're focusing on when we're talking about selecting texts and selecting lesson plans that are meaningful for our students and appropriate for our students. And so that I wanted you to get to see that example of the quantitative, the qualitative, and the task so that you could see when you're looking, for example, at trying to implement a particular lesson plan that maybe has a text with it with your students, you could be able to tell for yourself, is this a good fit or not? And so that's kind of walks you through text complexity. I think Crystal's coming in. Yay, good to see you, Crystal. She's coming in. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about is once you've selected your right test, good to see you, Crystal. I'm recording so you can actually go back and watch the beginning of this, Crystal. Okay, so we just watched this video called What is Text Complexity? And now, once you have the correct text, now we want to make sure we're doing the right things to support our students' reading comprehension. So the first one that I'm going to briefly look at is morphology. And I went ahead and pulled it up for you. This is a PowerPoint slide that's put out by the Louisiana Department of Education. And this one is for specifically for morphology. So I want us to kind of look, first of all, at what morphology is. And morphology is defined as a system of units of meanings in words. And so we would better know them as those prefixes, suffixes, and what we call root words. So that's what morphemes are. They're called it's word parts. So teachers at the secondary level, so when we're thinking 6th grade and above, we are often not equipped to remediate reading, but developing knowledge around morphology can help with reading fluency and vocabulary comprehension so that our students can become better readers and better understand the text that we're giving them. So I want you to think that morphemes are the smallest units of meaning. So some words have one morpheme, like, for example, play, show, build, but others are made up of multiple morphemes or word parts. For example, reconstructing. So you can see here we've got the root construct, and then we've got R as our prefix, and then ing as our suffix. And if we look at deconstruction, again, that is a multisyllabic, but it's also multiple morpheme word. So these can become pretty complex for our students, but if we help them with some of the common prefixes and suffixes that occur in our content areas, it's like we can help them decode those words themselves. So a good way to do this, and I'm going to just take a moment to look at the Scarborough's reading rope, which we looked at early on. When we use morphemes to help our students, we're really helping strengthen both the upper and the lower parts of Scarborough's reading rope. Remember that lower part is the decoding and the word recognition. And that upper part, it's going to help their vocabulary. The lower part is typically done in early elementary, mid-elementary, and that the comprehension portion is what we typically work on in secondary. So one of the things that you want to think about is by age 10, morphological awareness is a better predictor of decoding than phonological awareness. And let me go back and explain to you what that means. Remember that phonological awareness is simply the awareness of phonemes. So this is like words themselves. So this is saying that students, if we can give our students the tools of decoding those prefixes, suffixes, and root words, we can actually make them better readers at a faster rate. So I want you to think about what that means for our struggling readers who might have gaps in their ability to read. They're already behind their peers. Maybe they didn't even speak the language. They didn't even speak English when they first, came into our school system, and they're trying to catch up. Or maybe they have a learning disability or a reading disability. Helping them with the prefixes, suffixes, and root words or the morphemes can be very helpful. So this is one of the things I want you to see, and one of the things I'm kind of talking about here. Morphology skills helps everyone. So the students who are already advanced readers, they only get better. So you're not holding anybody back. The ones who are learning English, this is a great tool. And the students who need more support, they're going to get it if we teach them morphemes. So one of the recommendations is for you to figure out the morphemes in your subject area that occur most often. So Crystal, I know you teach math. Bianca, I know that you're teaching foreign language, and you also have a business background as well, you mentioned. So you might be having to teach some business education classes one day. You never know. They might tap into that background that you have and put you to work in a business ed class. But figuring out those morphemes is key. Many times our curriculum actually comes with lists. They actually come with lists, but we often don't use them in our classes. We just jump straight to the lessons, but we need to begin implementing them. And so look, these are 18 common ones. A lot of times people say, well, I'm not really even sure where to start. Starting with some common ones could be super helpful for our students. That way they have the tools to decode the words themselves. These are the most common Greek bases. So imagine the difference that we could make for our students if we simply taught them these. And I know you're probably wondering, how do I actually, and there are more links on here if you want to look up some of the other ones. They're actually divided by grade level, by content area. So I know a lot of times people are saying, when and how do I teach morphemes? When you're introducing a new unit or chapter, you could do it as a pre-work activity. When you could do it as a warm-up activity, like before a lesson. Many of you have like bell ringers or do nows. That's a great place to put them in and have students learn them. If you have early finishers, or if you pull for RTI, this would be a great activity for those students that you could implement. And they have online, if you look up, they have little games that they can do that you could link to your learning site, Blackboard, Canvas, Google Classrooms. So it's a really good way to include morphemic study in an easy way that supports all learners. In the same way, and I'm clicking off here now, all of these resources, of course, are on our Moodle today, but fluency, how can we help our students with fluency? So the first thing we want to do, again, is define what fluency is. It's the ability to read text with the appropriate rate, accuracy, and prosody. Prosody means it has to do with the tone of voice. And it demonstrates a comprehension as you're reading. And it's one of the things that makes our students strong readers. So for example, there are probably some students in your classes who do not want to read aloud. They don't feel confident. You know that you can't call on them to read because it embarrasses them. They read so slowly and with such little comprehension that the meaning is actually lost when they read it because the words are so chopped up and so broken. That's fluency. It means that they're not fluent in their reading. They do not do it fluidly. So fluency depends on well-developed word recognition skills, and it's acquired through systematic, explicit instruction. Strong language comprehension skills also support fluency. So when our students don't read very well, the stress of having them read aloud is so much that it's a cognitive overload for them. They cannot pay attention to the phonemes, the words, the sentence structure, and make meaning of what they're reading all at the same time and say it out loud. It's too many tasks, cognitive tasks for them to do at one time. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't give them practice, because let's look once again at Scarborough's reading rote. So the interesting thing about fluency is that it lives in every single strand. So the reason that we want to encourage fluency in our secondary students, middle and high school, is because when we allow them the opportunity to develop their fluency, we're helping them build every single strand in their reading rope. So fluency is said to be the bridge between word recognition and comprehension. And as I mentioned before, slow and laborious reading, it's frustrating and it's often very embarrassing. And then they just shut down. Those students they just kind of shut down out of class. I'll tell you a brief story. My brother had a reading disability, and we did not realize it until he was in high school. And I actually was his teacher. I did my student teaching in his class in high school. And I knew my brother. I knew that he didn't really care for reading, but he had developed coping skills. So anytime that there was anything to do with reading aloud, he would ask to go to the restroom. So he didn't get any reading assigned to him. Or he would pretend that he had fallen asleep. He wasn't really sleeping. I knew my brother. If he did have to read something aloud, he would pretend like he didn't know where they were in the book. I actually saw him one time he faked like he was sick and he didn't have very much of a voice, so he couldn't read. So I was shocked. And when I realized what was going on, and he was compensating, he had very strong verbal skills in other areas. So he could kind of get by and he could make C's and D's in English. He did very well in math, but of course, math didn't have as much reading. Science, he did very well in science, but it didn't have very much reading. So when we finally got him tested for it, he had a type of dyslexia, and he just had such strong coping skills that he had kind of been flying under the radar for years and years, and teachers never knew. So fluency is really important, and we want to think about how can we give our students practice with fluency. You can go through and look at some of these statistics regarding fluency, but what we really want to talk about is how can we give them practice to build fluency? So one of the things we want to do is we can actually group students homogeneously based on their reading levels. So in our classes, if we ever have a project, which Crystal, you won't have as much that's reading based, but every once in a while you might have your students working on a project, or you might have them work together in stations on like word problems or something like that. If we could group them based on similar reading levels, then they won't be as embarrassed about their reading level. And that way they're all basically the ones that are reading together in those small groups, they are similarly matched in ability. We could limit the groups to about 4 students, and then they could rotate to the teacher every 15 minutes or so. Or what I like to do in secondary, it just makes it easier, is I would actually go to them. I would go around the room and kind of listen in and help and guide them. So this is the perfect activity for those small groups, for any pullouts that you do. And it actually could help build their fluency. They're not depending then on the stronger reader to do all the reading. We could, at the same time, have some expectations for these small groups. Make sure that they clearly know what they're supposed to be doing. So Bianca, I'm thinking about you. If we're talking about something in foreign language, they would very clearly need to know what they're supposed to be doing. Are they labeling parts of a map? Or are they supposed to be reading a small paragraph to answer some questions about, culture or the life of a foreign country or something? Crystal, in your case, maybe it's a set of 3 word problems, and you would expect them to have clear answers by a designated timer. So we would want that timer to be visible, but then we would be going around and assisting them with any of the reading needs that they would have to accomplish those tasks. If you have a para in the room, a paraprofessional, this is the perfect way to engage that paraprofessional in helping with those tasks. There are also other things that we can do. So this talks more about the small groups, but there are other things that we can do, especially if our students are not progressing well. We can give them some more independent practice with the decoding or the phonics skills. I'm thinking specifically about, for example, Crystal, you know, students can do only so well on the LEAP test if they can't read. Because some of the problems are they're just going to be the actual numbers, but there are a lot of them that they have to read the context to actually set up the equations and so they might actually know the math, Crystal, but if they do not know how to read that little word problem, then they're not going to perform well on those standardized tests. So we can actually kind of isolate it for them, just the standardized testing portions that they really need help with, and teach them how to specifically read for those kinds of questions. Teach them how to highlight those keywords so that they know how they can use then the decoding, the prefixes and the suffixes that we built in before. So we can put them in small groups, but then we can also limit the material. So those are what we wanted to cover about just our general information today about text complexity, morphology, and then fluency, and how those all work together to support what texts are we picking out, and then what are we doing to support our students' comprehension of those texts. Before I move on, do you have any questions about that content? Yes, ma'am.
So if we say that it is important to explain our students like whether we're going to teach them that will be the vocabulary or that will be part of the frame lesson, like something like, okay, these are the words, these are going to be the hard words or the keywords
Yes.
that we're going to see today. Or today we are learning, I don't know, how to, interview a person in Spanish
Yeah.
or something. But or are we talking about can we also grade, like do a like see how much our students know before we start the lesson, if they already know those keywords? Or
Yes, that's a very, very good idea. In fact, it's kind of neat because that's actually what we're about to talk about. So assessing what they know in advance is definitely going to be a really important part of supporting reading comprehension. Yeah, that's a really good idea, Bianca. Very good. In fact, it's really wise to do this before each unit. And we're going to jump into talking about that. So yeah. Of course, you want to cover the vocabulary that's part of your curriculum. You'll have some sort of textbook or some sort of curriculum that's guiding you. Of course, you want to cover that, but you also may want to add in some terms that you think might be essential for them to support them in learning that curriculum. But a good way to do it is a pre-assessment, which we're about to talk about. Yeah, good. You're on the right track. Crystal, did you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, good deal. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move forward, and I'm going to explain to you how this next little activity, this next piece, is going to work together for our portfolio. So if you will remember, last week we engaged with the it's called the Reading Diversity Tool, and it was just it's a little activity that we use to basically examine lesson plans and texts. It's a way that we can tell if it is, and I mentioned before, is it at the right level for our students? So like earlier today when I was talking about complexity, Is it at the right Lexile level? Is it the right task that we're having to do? Is it the right kind of content? So when we talk about qualitative, quantitative, and task, and is it representative of our students? Is it representative of their backgrounds, their socioeconomic backgrounds, their race? So that particular little tool that we did the practice on, that's actually going to be one part of your portfolio. And I'll explain to you how you're going to use that a little bit later. The second part, which we're going to jump in today, is called a teaching cycle with pre-assessment. So we're not doing any teaching yet, but part of teaching, and that's why we call it a cycle, is we need to assess our students before we even jump in to teaching them. The more we can know about them, the better off we are. Next week, I'm going to talk to you about the Foursquare annotation of a sample lesson. And that's actually the third part. And what happens is we put all three of these together for our portfolio. So you don't have like a big test or anything in this class, but you put those three pieces together and you turn that in. I can't remember if it's module 7 or module 8. I think module 7, we work on it and we review it and you do like a little peer review. And then module 8 is when you actually turn it in. So I might need to amend that right here, but I just wanted you to know what's coming up and why we're working on these skills in these modules. So for this particular one, I must not have, let me see. I must not have it where I need it because I'm missing a piece here. Return to my normal role. Turn editing on. Let me make sure this is where y'all can view it. Oh, look, I had it hidden from y'all. That would have not been good. Show. Y'all need to be able to see that. And that one's showing. So that one is, says that one is showing. Okay. So now let me turn editing off. I'm going back to be a student so I can make sure we all see it. You see it the way we're supposed to. Glad I caught that. Okay. So as we move down, there they are. There they both are. In this particular part right here, I actually made you a little video that provides a little overview of what it is, the teaching cycle, pre-assessment, the activity. And oh, I see what I did. I linked the wrong thing. I'm going to have to correct this link because I see what I did already in the hyperlink. I linked it to my studio instead of to the actual link, but it's no big deal because I'm going to explain it to you now. But I want you to know that at any point you can go back and the video will be here for you because I'm going to change out that link and make sure that's working. This is the actual assignment though. So you guys, Crystal, you have students that you can use for this. In fact, I bet you, Crystal, you could probably do this right now on one of your classes because it's January and you know them very well at this point. So you could probably fill this thing out for one of the classes that you teach and with no problems. Bianca, you have your field placement. So you need to select one class that you will be using for this. So for this particular activity, the rationale is that before we can determine if a lesson and a text are appropriate for our learners, we have to learn all we can about our learners, including their culture and background, academic performance, learning styles, interests, and what we call observable behaviors. The objective is for us to use our field experience observations, field work, mentor collaboration to complete this pre-assessment for the learners. Crystal, remember I left it up to you guys, those of you who are teachers of record. You can use your own classes for this if you're planning to use your class to teach a field lesson. Sometimes even teachers of record who are students, they like to use another teacher's class for these. So that's up to you if you want to use your own students, or if you want to ask a buddy in your school, hey, can I use your class to do this and teach a lesson? We leave that up to you, how you would like to do that. So the very first part that you do is the class profile. Basic stuff. What's the grade, subject, what period of the day is it? And so we want to know here, is this like first period? So it's bright and early in the morning, or is this sixth period or fifth period, like right after lunch? And then I want you to describe the general atmosphere of the class, including learner enthusiasm for learning, motivation, engagement, their attitude, any of their interpersonal skills. So we're thinking about particularly about how they treat one another. What is the classroom culture like? Just a few sentences that describe the overall atmosphere of the class. And as you both know, every class is different. The personality of Crystal shaking her head, she's going, oh yeah.
Yes.
Yes, yes. The personality of first hour is usually totally different than fifth hour. Yes. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, is just generally describe the class. The second part of this activity is called the Student Achievement and Demographic Chart. You're going to create a chart, a table actually, that includes student demographic data and observable behaviors within the academic context. So use numbers instead of names for student identifiers. So you can use B and boy, G for girl, or male and female. A lot of times in our elementary context, they'll still have B for boy and G for girl, but feel free to use male and female or other. Many of our students now are identifying as other things. And so if that's information that you know, of course, don't go up and ask them. Definitely, we're not going to ask anybody that kind of stuff. But Crystal, you know your students well enough. Some of them may be at this point. And so that's why we leave that category for other. When we're talking about race and ethnicity, you can use these codes. If there is something else that's not included here, a different sort of race or ethnicity that's not included here, feel free to add to this key and to develop your own code for that if you need to. And then when we're talking about observable behaviors, these are student specific, but they're what we call low inference observations. This means that I'm not trying to make some sort of judgment call or infer anything based on what I see. I'm only saying what I see as the observable behavior. So I'm not saying I'm not making an excuse or I'm not doing anything. I'm just saying this is what I see happening in, observably in the class. So this would be during one lesson. And that's why, Crystal, I offer that if you want to do this for another class, another teacher's class, you're welcome to, because sometimes it's easier to be a little bit you know what I'm saying? It's easier not to have bias if it's students you don't know as well, is what I'm trying to say by that. So, but that's up to you. So these are some examples. In italics, I put pays attention throughout direct instruction, but talks about off-task subjects when transitioning to group work. Do you see here that this observation doesn't make any judgment calls about the student? It's just saying what we see. During the direct instruction, the student was paying attention. But when group work, they started talking about off-task subjects. They kind of lost their focus. Not making a judgment call, just putting it down there. Another example is engaged, asks questions, consistently participates in discussion, works hard from bell to bell. The next one is if interested in the content, is well behaved and engaged. If not interested, varying behaviors displayed from laying head on desk to talking to neighbor. Why is this one a little bit more what we consider high inference? Look at the third one. What does it say that might make it not quite as good of what we consider observable behaviors.
He's not interested in the class. He's not.
And
It
this
says right there. It's,
exactly, and this would be something that, for example, Crystal, who is a teacher of record and really, really knows those students, she may know this, but we're trying to be as clinical as possible. So this is one that I've seen a little bit, like my students use. It's fine. I don't really say, because it's not high, it's not really, really high inference in the sense of like, I don't know. I'm trying to think about how what we're doing is we're trying to draw some sort of conclusion about why sometimes he's well behaved and engaged and sometimes he's not. So as much as possible, we want to try to scrub anything in these that explains the behavior. We just want to say what it is. Okay. It's okay if some of this sneaks in there because you begin to really know the students. So it's hard to 100% remove it. But what I'm trying to get you to do is just as much as possible, be as clinical as you possibly can. So here's a sample table of what it would look like set up. We don't want to put any student names. We want to keep them non-identified. You need to know what their numbers and names because you need to be able to keep track of them. But we don't want any names turned in. Then here's a category for gender. And look, here it put F for female. That's, you can use, that's fine. Race, and then observable behavior. And so here's a little sample table where I put 3 entries. 3 entries. And so first of all, if you don't mind, you could come off mute. Why is it important for us to collect data like this? Why would that be important before we start trying to design a lesson, pick out text, etc.?
Because we'll be able to figure out, how the student works, like in the classroom or with others, or what extra attention we need to give them with certain
Great.
things.
Absolutely.
Especially, because sometimes some students work good, with whole class. Some just don't work well, whole class.
Yep.
Most work good with partners. Some work good individually. So you just kind of figure out based on what you observe.
Absolutely. So when we are the third part, which we're going to get to next week, Crystal, it kind of asks like, which parts of this activity would be good for small group? Well, if your students really don't work well, if none of them have ever proven that they really work very well with small group, then that might be something. It's difficult to just teach them a lesson that requires small groups if they don't know how to perform and behave in a small group. So we might need to teach them, this is what I'm expecting. This is the behaviors that, we have to put that stuff in before we can just load it, say, okay, everybody, this is what we're doing today. If they don't know how and they've never been really taught how to do that, we might have to build that in. So you said it perfectly. Some work better whole class, some work better small group. This would also be really great if we're trying to figure out which ones to group together. So, for example, if we're putting them in groups of 3, probably wouldn't be a good idea to put 3 together that talk the whole time.
Right.
We might need to balance that out. And so this gives us the data to justify the decisions that we're making in the class so that we can go, okay, this is why I'm doing, what I'm doing here. So good. Okay. There's one other thing, which kind of, and not kind of, it actually does go along exactly with what you were just mentioning, Crystal, and it's another layer of that data. So I want you now for the third part of it, you're going to create another chart. So this is a different chart. And we're going to create a chart that tracks at least 3 of these 4 bullets, either learner interest, learning style, learner achievement, learner exceptionality with an explanation. So we're going to use existing data that the mentor teacher already has. So like Bianca, you'll be collaborating with your field placement teacher to get this. Crystal, you'll either be using your own data or that buddy, whichever you decide. You can use last year's standardized tests. Bianca, this is where we were talking about that pre-assessment. So we should have some pre-test data for the current unit that they're working on. So this would be where we would have given them a little test in advance that doesn't count for a grade. It just lets the teacher know, how do my students even know any of this content? What do I need to focus on more? What do I maybe need to not put as much attention on? So we could use that. We could use a diagnostic test. So a lot of your schools already have like DIBELS, STAR testing. They already have like district assessments, like practice tests. You can use that. A learning styles quiz and or an interest inventory. So if the mentor does not have this data, you could ask them to administer one or two of them during one of your field experience periods. And I'll show you really quickly how you can Google some, and they come up really easily. They're very user-friendly. It's not a hard thing to do. So the numbers in this should be the same numbering system for your students as you used for the previous chart, okay? So the number 1 student that was here, please let it be the same one here, because we're going to be looking for patterns eventually about our students. So this is a sample table, and for this table, the 3 pieces of data that were chosen were learner exceptionalities, LEAP, so that was learner achievement, and then the last one was learning style. So it was these 3 bullets created this sample. So the exceptionality for this one, they have an IEP in place, and it's gifted and talented. They scored mastery on 7th grade LEAP test. So these students are in 8th grade. And their learning style, this student's learning style is visual. Student number 2 has a 504 in place, dyslexia and dysgraphia. They scored mastery on the 7th grade LEAP test, and their learning style is kinesthetic. They like to move. The 3rd student, there is no identified exceptionality for this student at all. They scored basic on the 7th grade LEAP test in whatever content area. So if it's the math content area or the English or whatever, and then their learning style is visual. And you would go on and do this for however many students are in the class, 10, 20, however many there are. And then ultimately we end up with a class profile that kind of gives us an idea of the whole class. We end up with a chart that tells us about the genders, races, and observable behaviors of our student. And so these are things that we usually can observe. So these are things that we usually can observe. The 3rd chart is usually things that we need metrics for. We need some kind of testing, some sort of measurements for these things. Why do you think that the 2nd chart could potentially be helpful to helping you figure out if lesson plans and texts are appropriate for this class?
Because you'll be able to see like how they work or what you need to do to get their interest for them to be, included in the lesson. Because you want all of the students to be included, not just some of them.
Good. Yes. I'm so glad you said that. That makes me so happy. It's like a teacher was talking or something. Yes, exactly. I keep freezing up here. That's why I have to stop my video. I'm so sorry. Yes, that's exactly why. So think about, for example, if we were picking a text for our students, and let's say that these students are in 8th grade, because I was using the most recent standardized test data. So that this was 7th grade data. So these students were in 8th grade, and the curriculum had a book for them that was written at a 4th grade level. Like it had a book, or not a 4th grade, a 5th grade level. The book was at a 5th grade level. That might send off a message to me, because so far with mastery, and basic, my students are probably going to be reading at or above grade level. So picking such a low grade level reader, it might be boring for them. So I really need to look at what the book is, because maybe the interest is going to be so high, the interest level will be so high that it's going to balance out for them, and it's going to end up being a good choice. Or maybe what I'm asking them to do with the book is so challenging that it would end up being a good choice. But if the book is a low level and it doesn't seem like it's going to be very interesting to my students, I might need to look and see if there's not a better book that would better match their reading skills and their reading abilities. And vice versa. If all of my students are scoring basic or approaching basic, and it's written way above their grade level, that might not be a good match either. I might need to figure out a way to help them read that text. Maybe find a simpler text that they could read alongside a more complex text. Also, look at all these exceptionalities here. Whew, I need to pay attention, because if I have several exceptionalities in this class that are going to require like extended time or read aloud, I need to budget for that in my lesson plan and in my grouping. So those are just some things that can help us determine, are we picking the right lessons and are we picking the right texts? We can't just pick them without knowing who our students are, or it's not going to make any sense. The last part of this activity allows you to reflect on it. So now that you know all of this about your learners, there are 4 questions that I'm asking you to answer. And these questions, I do want them fully responded, but a brief paragraph suffices. 3 to 5 sentences is typically fine to answer these questions. I simply want you to address them. And so this is actually the second part of your midterm portfolio. So you don't have anything to do this week for it, except start getting the data. Start working, figure out which class you want to do, if it's first hour, second hour, and start getting that data. So one of the things that teachers often ask me is, how can I find like a learning styles quiz? Your teacher that you're working with may already have one. But if you Google, you are going to get lots that come up, lots and lots and lots and lots. And you can figure out whichever one you would like to give to your learners. So let me do one where it says images. And look, there are so many. So you can custom, they have some for just for math. They have some, if you want to do that. They have interest inventories and learning styles. And the students can actually do this. They can score it themselves. And it's kind of a fun thing. They like it. They enjoy it. If you want to do one that's 100% digital, you could do online, free. And I'm trying to see, this is the one that I often use. And it's really easy. It's like 20 questions and the kids do it and it gives them their score right there on the screen. So if you could do that as well, if you have access to be able to link it for them. So Crystal, your students probably have their own laptops and stuff, don't they?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So this is really easy to just link to your Canvas or Google Class or whatever you're learning, whatever platform you use. And the kids love it. It's almost like a video game. They take it, and then at the end of the quiz, it gives them their learning style, and it tells them like tips that they can do to study and things that their teachers can do to help them. And like, it's kind of fun. They kind of like it. It's a good class discussion too, about like what I used to do when I would give my students this is I would do like 4 corners, and I would say, okay, go to the corner that was your learning style. Were you visual? Were you auditory? Were you kinesthetic? And so, of course, there were only 3 of them, and they would get in there, and it was so neat to see the students who you kind of already know too, like they know as well. And then we would talk about, all right, what did this say about your learning style? What are some things that your teachers can do to help you? What could you do? So kind of a good little fun little discussion. And so that's one thing. Or you could always do the pencil paper one. So I showed you the kind that you could print out for the students, and you can print those out. And those are super easy too, the ones I showed you. Images you can do. You can do any of it. There are lots of them. Just kind of browse through them. Bianca, I don't know if your field placement teacher is it a Spanish teacher? Did you say it was a foreign language teacher?
Yes, it is, but I didn't, I have trying to see at work what day I'm gonna be able to go. It's
Yeah.
kind of having some difficulties there, and I know there's I need to go more. I need to go often. That's the problem. It's not just one class that I need to, be there, and there's some in that process right now. But I want to ask you, so like I'm not going this week,
Uh-huh.
for sure. But if it has to be done this week, I don't know.
No, it
I
doesn't.
will-
It doesn't have
Okay.
to be done. No. It doesn't have to be done until you turn in your portfolio. So we're in week 5 right now, and that's going to be around week 7. So there's 2 weeks to, and I think it actually is week 8 is where you actually turn the portfolio in. So it gives you quite a bit of time to get that data. You could always email the teacher as well. And you could get some of this via email. But
Okay.
yes, so some of it you could get, you know what I'm saying? And your field placement teacher may already have this. They may have already done like a learning style, or the other one that you could do as well. Of course, you can get academic data. So you could get test scores or pre-test data. You could even get like, could I please have their scores from their last unit test? That's fine. You could do something like that. It's totally fine. Um,
Okay.
interest
Eh,
in interest inventories. Um, oh, look, Crystal, for math images. These are really fun. Math interest inventory. Me as a mathematician, they have them for like different grade levels. I'm trying to, that's a teacher pay teacher one. I don't want you to do teacher pay teacher. Let's put in free. Oh,
Yeah.
and this is so fun. Like they really like filling these out. Like this was a little Pinterest one that's a smiley, like a frowning. So they really enjoy it, and it will tell it's really good. So you could do content specific, or you could just do interest inventory for, let's say, middle school students. And let's put free again. And lots of them. Like, I mean, I know it's really small. You can't see it on the screen right now, but dig around and you could find some that work. There are also interest inventories again, if you prefer like the online kind. So interest inventories, and I'll put online and free. And these you'll kind of have to just, a lot of them are linked to careers. Let's see, for high school students, let's try that one. Yeah. Well, this is a PDF, so it's still not printable. I found one time that's the kind of the similar one that we had for the learning styles one. High school students, let's see. Online, free. Let me see if this was it. No, this is a printable one that you have to download. But I did see some that were clickable, like the one that we found. This is the Myers-Briggs personality test. That one is really fun to do with them. They love finding out about their personalities. So you could kind of click around. There's a lot online. Like I said, there's tons, and find one that works for you, that works for your particular setting, your students, and what you want to accomplish. And those are fun. They're fun to do. Remember, you only have to do 3 of those. I think I shut it down, but you only have to do 3 for that last chart. Yeah, no, here it is. So for example, you could pick one of these, interest or style, and then you know you're going to have something on achievement, student grades, test score, something, and then all of our teachers have to have whatever their learner exceptionalities are, all of that stuff. So that kind of makes it a little bit easier to do. All right, questions about this task or activity?
I don't have
Okay.
a question about this one, but I do have a question about last week. I wasn't here last week
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
the reading diversity tool.
Yep.
I looked at it and I had no idea what I was supposed to do.
Okay, let me go back. So you are going to complete this tool. Let me
So was
open
I
it up.
supposed to look at the where it says math lesson plan and text? Was I supposed to look at that portion?
Yes, or you can pick your own. You guys have your own lesson plans. So you could have, I think so. Let me make sure. Yes, to analyze one representative text in your content area or a similar content area. I've provided some lesson plans, but you are welcome to use your own. So you could have either used the ones that I provided, or you could use your own lesson plan. If you provide your own, please just upload it so that we could see your lesson plan with the tool.
Well, I guess my concern, because I know when we do lesson plans, they don't ask for that much stuff. So I may have to use that one just
Use
because when
it.
I looked at it, it's really detailed.
Yeah,
Our
yeah,
lesson
use
plans
it.
are not as detailed.
Absolutely. That's why I provided them for you. Use it. And also a lot of times what I find, I am able to do better work when it's not my own work.
Mm.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not looking at it like, well, this is my lesson plan. This is what I did. So I'm able to, I can judge it better because I'm not, like if it's my work, I want to make sure that I'm going to be good because I did it. So I find that it's actually easier to do these samples than to do my own work because I learn more from it. I learn more from the process. So the tool itself is not very, the PDF is not user friendly. Like it looks really nice the way it's set up, but what we have found is it's really difficult to type in this tool. So the tool is measuring complexity, which is one of the things that we talked more about today. It's measuring diversity and representation. It's measuring critical literacy of our students. So that's that thing that we were talking about early in the semester about helping them think, like learn how to think about what they're being presented with. And then the last thing is reader and task considerations. So this is who are our students and what are we asking them to do? And that's that mirrors and windows concept of we want to reflect their own experiences, but we also want to give them perspective on other experiences. And that's the 4 parts of the tool. So, for example, for the math lesson, and you fill as much of this out as you can. It doesn't have an illustrator, so you would leave that part blank, but you would just put the title of the lesson. And I think the math lesson actually has like a company that's, there's a company that's publishing it. So I don't even think there's like a person's name. I think it's a company. And
Okay.
then you can tell what the basic grade level is. In that particular lesson, there are only word problems. And a lot of times the math students go, well, it doesn't have a text because they feel like it needed to have like I don't know, some sort of novel or something with it. Well, in math, most of your text is word problems. So that's what you're looking at, is the actual word problems themselves that are in the lesson, the worksheets, the word problems, all of that. And that's all in that lesson itself. And so then you go through these and you're basically making some judgment calls about this. You do the very best that you can, answering as much of it as you can. Again, what we have found is it is not super user friendly. So typically what my students do is they copy the question and they just put their answer and they put it in a Word document. Because once you start typing in these, let me show you what happens. Like, let me just do this. You saw it, Bianca, when you tried it. Look, it starts scrunching up.
Yeah,
And
we have that problem whenever we were doing. So what we did is we download this I download that, and then I save as first I download as a PDF. Then I went to my PDF. I know it sounds complicated, but it worked at the end. So I got my PDF, then I save as Word, and it keeps the format exactly as it is in Word. Of course, by the first page,
perfect.
because of the graphic, it will not
Yeah.
come clear, but it doesn't matter. We don't need the first page. We
That's
need
right.
all down. And everything come out good. The problem that we have was that whenever we want to attach it, like upload, we couldn't upload all those pages. We couldn't upload it in Word. They just let us upload a picture. So I had to use the snipping tool.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yes, I did a snip like on Word. I had to put it scene double page, so show both pages. So I
Yeah.
did use my snipping tool and I uploaded.
Well,
That's
that's really smart, Bianca. You went to a lot of trouble. That's amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. Most of the time what students do is they just copy and paste. That's really fantastic. So Crystal, you have several options there about how, you want to do it. I'm not picky on your format. The activity is really just meant to get you thinking about this kind of stuff and examining this kind of stuff. Like for example, Crystal, this is one that we talked about last week, just to kind of give you a sample. So when we think about what we're presenting our students with, a lot of times we do not think about what's called the gaps and the silences in our literature. So authors intentionally and unintentionally include and exclude information. A gap exists where something is left out of the text for the reader to fill in. A silence occurs when a voice or a viewpoint is left out or suppressed. So one of the things that the students in the science group noted about one of the lesson plans that I have up there are for science students. I think it's chemistry. It had pictures in it because it referred them to a textbook, and the pictures had like high school students who were doing a lab. Like the high school students, the pictures of the high school students doing the lab were like next to the lab directions, and the students had on lab coats and they all looked the same. But in every single picture, the boys were the ones actually doing the lab. The girls were just sitting there watching them in every picture. There were like 6 pictures, and every picture it had the boys as actively engaged in the lab, and the girls were just kind of on the side, their arms were crossed, they were just looking on at the boys. Subliminally, what kind of messages does that send to our female students in science classes?
Like I don't know. I mean, I guess they think they're too good to do it.
Could, or the way that the students interpreted it is science is really for boys.
Mhm.
They're the ones really getting to do it. Like the boys were the ones holding the beakers. The boys were the ones measuring everything for the lab in the pictures. The girls weren't doing anything. They were just watching them. And I never even noticed that, but my female students, actually it was a male and a female student. They're the ones who noticed it, and they were like, "What, Miss Benoit, this is really weird. Like technically, it's representing both male and female students, but when you look at it, the boys are the only ones that are active, that are actively engaged. If you think about it, that actually supports. We have for a very long time there are more boys in our science fields than there are girls. Like if you go into our college classrooms, there are more boys, there are more males who are in engineering, more males in the chemistry classes, more males in those classes than there are girls. And it was kind of interesting. I had never thought about that at all. So also when we think about certain passages, certain ways that we're looking at things, who are we potentially leaving out and who are we including? Again, this is going to be very different for every content area. Math is oftentimes not quite as affected by some of these things, but sometimes you'd be surprised about how math is affected. So it's just a little activity to get us to thinking about our texts and our lessons and what we're having our students do. So that's the whole purpose of it.
So will every question have to be answered?
No, I'm
Okay.
glad you asked that. No, there are some where it's not even going to be appropriate for your lesson or your text. And that's completely fine. That's completely fine.
And author, I put my name, but the class, I mean, the lesson wasn't mine. So I thought I should put whoever's lesson that belonged to in author.
Yeah,
So I put mine. Oops.
yeah, that's fine. Are you talking about on the tool itself?
Yes, I did. Where it says author, I put my name. I thought that we were talking about the assignment, but because that class, I mean the lesson wasn't mine.
Right. That's okay. That's okay. I think it was Christina's, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine, Bianca. It's no problem. And I knew y'all were working together. So that's okay. It's all right. But moving forward, you will put who the real Arthur is.
Okay.
Okay. And then the way these are going to work together is, so let me kind of go back to this week and show you, and this will be our final thoughts before we close it out. The way that these will work together is you're collecting your student data. You're starting to collect your student data. And then beginning next week, you need to have a sample lesson plan. So you can use one of yours. You can find one online, like feel free to find one in your content area online. I'm happy to help you find a lesson plan. If you want some assistance, just email and let me know. I don't mind it at all. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to analyze that lesson. You're not going to have to write your own. We're just going to analyze it. We're going to look at that lesson. We're going to make sure, would this lesson be good for our learners? Or do we need to change some things about it? And then we're going to make sure that we put it through that tool so that we can actually examine what the complexity of the text and what we're having our students do with the text. So that's how all three pieces of this are going to go together. So you just need to have a sample lesson plan, and you need to be working on that data. And those are the things that we put together for that midterm portfolio. Kind of making some sense a little bit?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay. Just making sure. All right. And then observation field experiences. So in module 6, you'll submit half of your field experience work. So that's 7.5 hours. The literacy strategies mini lessons, those are up, they're open. Bianca, you and Christina have already signed up. I think I saw that Peyton already signed up for one. And that's something, Crystal, that you'll definitely want to go back. I introduced that last week in module 4, the literacy strategies mini lessons.
I'll do it today.
You looked at it?
No, but I'll do it today.
Okay, no problem, no problem. And once you have a chance to look at it, if you have any questions, just reach out, Crystal, and we can either hop on a Zoom or we can do some emails back and forth. I think everything's pretty much there. It's pretty user friendly, but definitely let me know if you have any questions. And then that's it. That's it, you guys.
For the mini lesson, I had to do my mini lesson, right? It's in Teach It.
Your mini lesson, which one did you let's see which one you signed up for. I don't remember which week it is.
No.
Let's see which one you signed up for. I thought you and oh, Mallory, she already signed up for one. Okay. That's who it was, not Peyton. Let me see. I thought y'all signed up for it pretty soon, didn't you?
We did, but actually we
There it is.
we were in the class and
There it is. Online
is.
student Bianca, whole brain teaching. So yours is 2/27, the week of 2/27. And Christina signed up for word mapping and she liked that one. I sent her some links and she liked that one. That one's on, so she'll do that on 2/13. Poor Christina. We'll see what happens with her health.
Yeah.
I know. So remember, Bianca, you're not teaching that in the field. You're just creating that. It's that narrated PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is the sample of it right here. Right. And so this is the template for it. And it shows you how to set it up. Oh, you can't see it. So wait, I have to do the new share. So remember, this is what shows you. This is the sample I created for y'all because not only am I giving you the directions in this, but it's actually the template of how to do it. So this is what you will do.
This is going to be a sample for how to do the literacy strategies mini lesson.
And it walks you through every part of it, how to set every slide up. And so remember, you're not teaching this in the field. This is where you are, let me do stop sharing here. You're going to upload that to Moodle. And that's why we call it a mini lesson. It's not a full field lesson. It's just a little mini lesson about the literacy strategies that we can use in our classes. And we're teaching each other about the strategies. We're not teaching students, our P12 students, our pre-K through 12. We're teaching each other. That's why I call it a mini lesson. We're warming up to it. And you upload it right here in the presentation portal. That's where you'll link it. So I'm
sorry. So once again, we're teaching the strategy that we chose.
Yep.
Okay. Now I don't know, it's a class. Okay. Okay, I got it.
Yep. You're going to make that narrated PowerPoint is what I recommend you use. And I show you right here how to do that. So right here, I put the directions for how to create the PowerPoint, how to do the narrations. And if you want, you can upload it to a YouTube video. You do not have to do that though. We've had really good success with students just uploading the PowerPoint itself with the narrations on it. That typically works totally fine. So you're going to upload that PowerPoint to this. And Crystal, are you MAT or PBC?
Oh, PBC.
Okay. So you do one. You only do one mini lesson. MAT students will do 2 of these lessons. So Bianca, you're MAT, right? Yeah. So you and Christina signed up for 1, and then y'all need to sign up for 1 more later in the semester. I recommend after midterm, let's get yourself through midterms and then sign up for 1 more. And because that's part of your MAT work. You'll do 2 of them. And once you do 1, you'll see it's not hard. It's actually pretty fun. You're teaching us about the strategy and how to use the strategy. So pretty good.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. All right. I'm going to stop recording and stop sharing and stop everything. Let me see the recording.